Emily Morgan and Claire Morgan grew up in the same house, but they never saw the world the same way. Emily, the elder by 3 years, was the daughter of Richard Morgan, a wealthy businessman who owned a mid-sized but thriving logistics company known as Morgan Freight Solutions. Her mother had passed away when Emily was only 8 years old. Richard remarried 2 years later to a woman named Helena, who already had a young daughter, Claire. Emily never fully accepted Helena as her mother, and her relationship with Claire was distant at best. Still, they lived under the same roof, attended the same private schools, and appeared to be one family from the outside. Yet behind closed doors, there was always tension. Emily believed Claire was spoiled, overly pampered by Helena, and always competing for Richard's affection. Claire, on the other hand, saw Emily as cold, arrogant, and entitled to a life she never had to earn. As the years went by, Richard poured his energy into expanding Morgan Freight Solutions. By the time Emily was in her early 20s, the company had grown into one of the most reliable logistics firms in the region, handling contracts with multinational corporations. Emily followed in her father's footsteps, joining the company after finishing her degree in business administration. Claire, however, studied marketing and wanted nothing to do with the family business, at least not initially. But fate had other plans. In 2018, tragedy struck when Richard Morgan suffered a fatal heart attack. He was only 61 years old. His death sent shockwaves through both the family and the company. Overnight, Emily was thrust into the position of CEO, following her father's will that explicitly named her as the rightful heir and successor of Morgan Freight Solutions. Claire inherited money and properties from Helena's side, but was excluded from the business. On paper, everything seemed clear. But in reality, Richard's decision planted the seeds of resentment that would grow into something deadly. At first, Claire appeared supportive. She stood beside Emily during the funeral, offered her condolences, and even helped manage family affairs. But quietly, she was fuming. She believed Richard had been manipulated by Emily, that her stepsister had always been positioned as the golden child, while she was left in the shadows. Claire confided in friends that the company should have been split equally, and that she intended to fight for what was rightfully hers. Emily, meanwhile, threw herself into running the business. She worked tirelessly, attending late-night meetings, traveling to secure contracts, and ensuring the company stayed afloat during the leadership transition. Employees respected her dedication, but they also noticed her stress. She became thinner, more isolated, and increasingly wary of those around her. And she had good reason to be. Within months of Richard's death, Claire began showing up at company events. She wasn't an employee, but she mingled with board members, whispered to investors, and began spreading doubt about Emily's capabilities. She hinted that Emily was reckless with finances, that she lacked experience, and that perhaps Richard had made a mistake. It didn't take long before Claire's ambitions became public. She filed a legal petition claiming that Morgan Freight Solutions was a marital asset, and therefore, as Helena's daughter, she had a legal right to part ownership. Though her case was weak, the lawsuit placed enormous pressure on Emily. Shareholders panicked, employees grew restless, and competitors tried to exploit the instability. Still, Emily fought back. She hired top lawyers, defended her position, and refused to give Claire even a fraction of the company. To Emily, this wasn't just about business. It was about honoring her father's legacy. But to Claire, it was about survival. She had debts, a failing marriage, and a lifestyle she could no longer afford. To her, the company represented salvation. And when legal means failed, she turned to darker methods. Investigators would later uncover the shocking extent of Claire's obsession. Bank records showed she had drained her accounts on private investigators, attempting to dig up dirt on Emily. Emails revealed she contacted disgruntled former employees, hoping someone would accuse Emily of fraud or misconduct. She even tried bribing an accountant to falsify records against her stepsister. But none of it worked. The more Claire tried, the stronger Emily seemed to stand. But the battle was taking its toll. Emily's health was deteriorating. She confided in her closest friend, Sarah, that she sometimes feared for her safety. "Claire won't stop until she destroys me," she once said. Those words would prove hauntingly prophetic. In January of 2020, Emily was found dead in her home. She had been poisoned. The scene was staged to look like a suicide. A wine glass lay near her bedside, and a handwritten note was left on the nightstand, suggesting she could no longer bear the stress of the company and family disputes. At first glance, the police considered it an open and shut case. A stressed CEO, overwhelmed by lawsuits and family drama, had taken her own life. But something felt wrong. Detectives noticed the handwriting on the note didn't quite match Emily's. There were also no traces of her fingerprints on the glass, only partial prints belonging to someone else. And toxicology reports confirmed that the poison used was not something Emily could have easily accessed. Suspicion quickly turned toward Claire. When questioned, she denied everything. She claimed she had been out of town the night of Emily's death and insisted she wanted reconciliation, not revenge. But detectives weren't convinced. They dug deeper and discovered security camera footage from a neighbor's home, showing Claire's car near Emily's residence on the night in question. Further investigation revealed that Claire had recently purchased a rare type of poison from an online supplier under a fake name. The trail of evidence was damning. And yet, Claire remained confident. She hired high-profile attorneys, argued that the evidence was circumstantial, and even suggested that Emily's close friend Sarah might have had motives of her own. For months, the case dragged on in court, with both sides presenting conflicting narratives. But in the end, the truth was undeniable. In 2021, Claire Morgan was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The courtroom was packed the day the verdict was read. Some of Emily's former employees wept, while others shook their heads in disbelief. A once-respected family had been torn apart, not by outside enemies, but by greed from within. The aftermath of the case left deep scars. Morgan Freight Solutions continued under new leadership, but the name Morgan was forever stained by the scandal. Employees struggled to move past the betrayal. Investors questioned how something so dark could happen behind the polished glass walls of a logistics empire. But perhaps the heaviest shadow fell on the idea of family itself. For many, the case of the Morgan sisters became a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we should fear the most. In the end, Emily's words to Sarah before her death echoed through the trial and beyond. "Claire won't stop until she destroys me." She was right. And though justice was served, it came far too late to save her. This is the tragic story of the claim for inheritance, the betrayal of the Morgan sisters,